The Conquerors. The Vex Empire had swept through 17 star systems without meeting meaningful resistance. Their massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, possessed weapons that could crack planets in half. The alien species they encountered either surrendered immediately upon seeing their fleet or were obliterated within hours. Admiral Krath stood on the bridge of the flagship destroyer of worlds, his forearms crossed behind his back as he observed the tactical display. The latest conquest had been pathetically easy. The bird-like Altans had surrendered their homeworld after a single demonstration of the Vex's plasma cannons. Their cities now lay in ruins, their population enslaved. "Admiral," reported Commander. "Vex, his scaled hide gleaming under the bridge lights. Long-range sensors detect another system ahead. Single inhabited planet. Primitive technology signatures." Krath's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Excellent. What do we know about this species?" "They call themselves humans, sir. Single homeworld called Earth. Our scouts report they have basic space travel, but nothing that could threaten us. They appear to be a young species, barely a few thousand years old." The bridge crew shared amused hisses. Most spacefaring races were tens of thousands of years old before they developed interstellar travel. These humans seemed almost infantile, by comparison. "Their defensive capabilities?" Krath asked. "Minimal, Admiral. A few orbital stations, some primitive warships. Nothing larger than a few hundred meters. Their weapons appear to be basic kinetic projectiles and crude energy beams." Krath's four eyes gleamed. "Then we shall make this quick. Signal the fleet to prepare for standard conquest protocol. We'll offer them surrender first. Some of these primitive species make excellent slaves if they comply." The Vex fleet consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, each equipped with planet-cracking weapons, gravity manipulators, and shielding that had never been penetrated. They had conquered worlds with technology far superior to what these humans possessed. As they approached the system, Krath reviewed the tactical reports. Earth appeared to be the humans' only significant world, with a few small colonies on nearby planets. Their total population was barely 8 billion, a fraction of most spacefaring civilizations. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human in what appeared to be a military uniform. The creature was smaller than most sentients the Vex had encountered, with only 2 arms and primitive features. "This is Admiral Ross of the Earth Defense Fleet," the human said. "You are entering our solar system without permission. State your intentions." Krath stepped forward, his massive form dwarfing the communication console. "I am Admiral Krath of the Vex Empire. We are here to offer you terms of surrender. Submit to our rule, and your species will be spared. Resist, and we will demonstrate why 17 civilizations have already fallen before us." The human's face remained impassive. "We decline your offer. You have 1 hour to leave our system before we consider you hostile." The Vex bridge erupted. Laughter. Commander Vex wiped tears from his eyes. "Admiral, did this primitive just threaten us?" Krath's amusement quickly turned to anger. "Foolish creatures. Very well, begin the demonstration. Target their largest city and prepare a warning shot." "Sir," interrupted the sensor officer, his voice uncertain. "I'm detecting movement from the human fleet. They're approaching us." "How many ships?" 12, sir. All smaller than our escort vessels." Krath's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Let them come. Their primitive weapons won't even scratch our shields. This will be over quickly." But as the human ships drew closer, something nagged at Admiral Krath. In all their conquests, no species had ever approached the Vex fleet directly. They either surrendered immediately or tried to flee. These humans seemed almost eager for battle. "Admiral," the sensor officer said, his voice now containing a note of confusion, "the human ships are not powering their weapons." "What?" "They appear to be waiting, sir." On the tactical display, the 12 human vessels had arranged themselves in a defensive formation between the Vex fleet and Earth. They were tiny compared to the Vex dreadnoughts, like insects facing giants. "Sir," the communications officer reported, We're receiving another transmission. Admiral Ross appeared on screen again, his expression calm but determined. This is your final warning. Leave our system now, or face the consequences. Krath's forearms trembled with rage. Fire on their lead vessel. Show them the power of the Vex Empire. The order was given, and the Destroyer of Worlds unleashed a plasma barrage that had reduced moons to asteroids. The energy beams struck the human ship directly, and then something impossible happened. The human vessel's shields flared briefly and held. First contact with the impossible. The silence on the Vex bridge stretched for several heartbeats as every crew member stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human ship, no larger than their smallest escort vessel, hung motionless in space. Its shields had absorbed the full force of their planet-killing weapons without even flickering. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Vex, his scaled hands trembling as they gripped the console. "Nothing can withstand our primary weapons." Admiral Krath's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "Sensor error. It has to be. Run full diagnostics on all weapon systems." "Sir," the weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. "All systems show green." Direct hit confirmed. The energy discharge was sufficient to destroy a small continent. On the main screen, Admiral Ross's image remained steady. The human seemed almost bored by the exchange. "Are you finished with your demonstration?" Krath stepped closer to the screen, his massive form casting shadows across the bridge. "What manner of shielding do you possess? What technology are you hiding?" A slight smile crossed the human's face. "The same technology we've been using for the past 300 years. Nothing special." "Impossible," Krath roared. "No species develops such defensive capabilities so quickly. You're barely out of your home system." "Admiral Krath," Ross said, his tone becoming almost conversational, "you've made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because we're young, we're weak. You assumed that because we haven't conquered other worlds, we're defenseless." The human leaned forward slightly. "You never asked why we haven't expanded beyond our system despite having the technology to do so for centuries." Something cold settled in Krath's stomach. In all their intelligence gathering, they had focused on human capabilities, not human choices. Why would a spacefaring species remain confined to a single system? "Enlighten me," Krath said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier arrogance. "We learned early that the galaxy is full of predators like you," Ross explained. "Species that expand through conquest, that see other civilizations as resources to be consumed. So we made a choice. We would perfect our defenses and wait." "Wait for what?" "For someone like you to test us." Krath's mandibles clicked nervously. "You speak as if 12 ships can challenge an entire fleet." 12 ships, Ross repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that should be sufficient." The casual confidence in the human's voice sent ripples of unease through the Vex crew. Admiral Krath had conquered 17 civilizations, each with fleets numbering in the hundreds or thousands. Never had he encountered such calm certainty from such a small force. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "the human ships are changing formation." On the display, the 12 human vessels began to spread out, moving with precision that spoke of extensive training. Their movements were fluid, almost dance-like, as they positioned themselves around the Vex fleet. "They're trying to surround us," Commander Vex observed. "Standard harassment tactics." But Krath noticed something else. The human ships weren't moving like harassers or scouts. They moved like predators positioning themselves around prey. "Sir," the sensor officer said, his voice tight with confusion, "I'm reading massive energy buildups from all human vessels." "What kind of energy signatures?" "Unknown, sir. Unlike anything in our databases." Admiral Ross's image flickered slightly, as power was diverted to the human weapon systems. "Admiral Krath, you've had your demonstration. Now it's our turn." "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Krath commanded. "Return fire with everything we have." The Vex fleet began to move, their massive dreadnoughts turning to bring their full weapon arrays to bear. Plasma cannons, gravity bombs, and quantum disruptors unleashed a storm of destruction that lit up the void between the ships. The human vessels danced through the barrage like leaves in a gentle breeze. Their movements defied physics as Krath understood it. No ship should be able to accelerate that quickly or change direction so sharply without crushing its crew. "How are they moving like that?" Commander Vex demanded. "Unknown, sir. Their maneuvering capabilities exceed our projections by several orders of magnitude." Then the human ships opened fire. The weapons that emerged from the human vessels weren't the crude kinetic projectiles or basic energy beams their intelligence had predicted. Streams of coherent energy that seemed to bend space itself reached out toward the Vex fleet. The first beam struck the dreadnought World Ender. The ship's shields, which had never failed in a century of warfare, collapsed instantly. The beam continued through the hull as if it were paper, emerging from the other side in a spray of molten metal and escaping atmosphere. The World Ender, a vessel that had destroyed planets, broke apart in silence. Admiral Krath watched in horror as 11 more beams reached out toward his remaining ships. The hunter becomes prey. The World Ender's destruction sent shockwaves through the Vex fleet that had nothing to do with the explosion. For the first time in their military history, a Vex dreadnought had been destroyed by a single shot from a smaller vessel. Admiral Krath gripped the command console as his flagship shuddered under evasive maneuvers. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, but he could see the fear in their movements. The Vex had built their empire on the certainty of their technological superiority. That certainty was crumbling with each passing second. "Status report," Krath barked. "The Bone Crusher and Star Killer have taken direct hits," reported the communications officer. "Both ships are venting atmosphere. The Bone Crusher has lost primary power. On the tactical display, the human ships moved like ghosts through the Vex formation. Their weapons fired with surgical precision, each shot finding its target despite the desperate evasive maneuvers of ships 10 times their size. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, his voice barely controlled. "I'm detecting something else. Long-range sensors show additional contacts approaching from the outer system." "More human ships?" "No, sir. These signatures are different, larger." Admiral Ross's image flickered back onto the main screen, his expression unchanged despite the battle raging around them. Behind him, Krath could see the bridge of the human ship, calm, organized, with crew members working with the efficiency of a machine. "Admiral Krath," Ross said, his voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. "You seem surprised by our capabilities." "What are you?" Krath demanded. "No species developed such technology so quickly." "You're right," Ross acknowledged. "We didn't develop this technology quickly. We developed it thoroughly." Another Vex dreadnought, the Planet Breaker, exploded in a cascade of fire and debris. The human ship responsible barely slowed as it passed through the wreckage, its shields deflecting chunks of armor plating that would have crippled lesser vessels. "While your empire was conquering worlds and enslaving populations," Ross continued, "humanity was doing something different. We were learning." "Learning what?" "Learning from you." The words hit Krath like a physical blow. "What do you mean? Did you think we weren't watching? For 3 centuries, we've observed your expansion, studied your tactics, analyzed your technology. We've watched you destroy 17 civilizations, and we learned from every single conquest." The tactical display showed another grim development. 3 more Vex ships were now dead in space, their crews either dead or desperately trying to restore power. The human vessels continued their deadly dance, untouchable and unstoppable. "Every weapon you've used we found a counter for," Rossi explained. "Every strategy you've employed we developed a response. Every weakness you've shown, we cataloged and prepared to exploit." "That's impossible," Commander Vex protested from his station. "Our intelligence networks would have detected such preparations." Ross's smile was cold. "Your intelligence networks saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Primitive weapons, basic defenses, a young species barely capable of spaceflight." The pieces began falling into place in Krath's mind. The human colonies he'd observed were small and lightly defended, because humanity had never intended to defend. Them. They were decoys, designed to make the Vex believe humans were weak and scattered. The real question, Ross continued, is why we waited so long to reveal ourselves. Why? Krath found himself asking, though he dreaded the answer. Because we needed to be certain. We needed to know that when we finally acted, we could end this threat permanently. On the long-range sensors, the approaching contacts were resolving into clearer images. They weren't ships, they were structures. Massive geometric forms that dwarfed even the Vex dreadnoughts. Sir, the sensor officer whispered, those aren't vessels, they're space stations. Mobile space stations. Admiral Ross nodded. Battle stations. We call them Fortress-class mobile defense platforms. Each one is roughly the size of your largest dreadnought, but with firepower equivalent to your entire fleet. Krath's 4 arms began to shake as the full scope of his mistake became clear. He had led his fleet not into a simple conquest, but into a carefully prepared trap. The humans hadn't been waiting in their system because they were afraid. They had been waiting because they were ready. How many? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. How many civilizations have you destroyed, Admiral? 17. Then 17 should be sufficient to return the favor. On the display, 17 massive human fortress stations emerged from the outer darkness of the Sol system, their weapons already charging for the final phase of the battle. The hunter had become the prey, and the prey had been preparing for this moment for 300 years. The reckoning, the arrival of the 17 fortress stations transformed the battlefield from a skirmish into humanity's final judgment upon the Vex Empire. Each station moved with deliberate purpose through the void, their massive forms bristling with weapons that made the human warships' armaments look like toys. Admiral Krath stood frozen on his bridge as the tactical display updated with increasingly dire information. Of his original 12 dreadnoughts, only 6 remained operational. The others drifted as burning hulks or had been completely vaporized by the humans' impossible weapons. Sir, the communications officer said, his voice cracking with strain, we're receiving surrender offers from the Deathbringer and Worldshaker. Both captains are requesting permission to withdraw. Krath's mandibles clicked in bitter irony. His own captains were doing exactly what 17 other civilizations had done when faced with overwhelming Vex firepower. They were trying to surrender. Denied, he snarled. We are Vex, we do not surrender. But even as he spoke the words, Krath knew they rang hollow. The Vex had built their identity on being the apex predators of the galaxy. What were they when something higher on the food chain finally revealed itself? On the main screen, Admiral Ross watched the proceedings with the calm attention of a scientist observing an experiment. Behind him, his crew worked with mechanical precision, their actions coordinated in a way that spoke of years of preparation for this exact scenario. Admiral Krath, Ross said, his tone almost sympathetic, your remaining ships are badly damaged. Your crews are dying. You've lost half your fleet in less than 20 minutes. This doesn't have to continue. What are your terms? Krath found, himself asking, the words bitter in his throat. Terms? Ross seemed genuinely puzzled. I'm not offering terms, Admiral. I'm offering you a choice. The fortress stations had formed a perfect sphere around the remaining Vex vessels, their weapons trained inward. The smaller human warships had withdrawn to a safe distance, their job apparently complete. What choice? You can die here, fighting, uselessly against forces you cannot comprehend, Ross explained. Or you can live long enough to carry a message back to your empire. Krath's 4 arms trembled with rage and humiliation. What message? That humanity is no longer hiding. The tactical display chimed softly as new contacts appeared at the edge of the system. More human vessels were arriving, not just ships, but massive construction platforms, colony vessels, and what appeared to be mobile shipyards. For 3 centuries, we've remained in our home system while building our strength, Ross continued. We've watched your empire grow fat and complacent on easy conquests. We've studied every species you've destroyed, learned from their mistakes, incorporated their innovations into our own designs. One of the fortress stations fired a single shot past the bow of Krath's flagship. The beam traveled for several light seconds before striking an asteroid in the outer system. The rock, easily a kilometer across, simply ceased to exist. We've had time to perfect technologies your scientists couldn't imagine, Ross said. We've had time to build weapons that make your planet crackers look like children's toys. Most importantly, we've had time to plan. Plan for what? The end of your empire. The words hung in the space between them like a death sentence. Krath realized that everything he'd believed about human limitations had been a carefully constructed lie. They weren't a young species stumbling through their first steps into the galaxy. They were an apex predator that had been patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The 17 civilizations you destroyed, Ross continued. We've been in contact with their survivors. Refugee populations you assumed were scattered and broken. They've been waiting too, Admiral, waiting for someone strong enough to give them justice. On the long-range sensors, Krath could see more contacts approaching from different vectors. Ships with non-human designs, the survivors of the Vex conquests, now armed with human technology and burning for revenge. You see, Ross explained, humanity's greatest strength was never our weapons or our defenses. It was our ability to unite others against a common threat. While you were conquering, we were building alliances. While you were destroying, we were preserving. The Bone Crusher finally succumbed to its damage, breaking apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. Its destruction left only 5 Vex dreadnoughts, still capable of flight. Choose quickly, Admiral, Ross said, his patience finally showing signs of strain. My allies are less inclined toward mercy than I am. The survivors of the worlds you've burned want to watch your ships die slowly. Krath looked at his remaining fleet, then at the impossible odds arrayed against them. The Vex Empire had thought itself the ultimate predator, but they had been living in an ecosystem they never truly understood. Now the real apex predator had revealed itself, and it had been hunting them all along. The New Order Admiral Krath's decision came not from courage, but from the cold realization that his empire's survival depended on understanding exactly what humanity had become. With shaking hands, he ordered his remaining ships to stand down and transmitted his surrender to the human fleet. Wise choice, Admiral Ross acknowledged. You'll be escorted to one of our stations for processing. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war, something your empire never extended to its victims. The human warships moved with practiced efficiency, forming escort formations around the 5 surviving Vex dreadnoughts. As they traveled toward the nearest fortress station, Krath found himself studying the human vessels with new eyes. Every line of their construction spoke of purpose, of lessons learned from centuries of observation and preparation. The fortress station they approached was a marvel of engineering that dwarfed anything in the Vex arsenal. Its surface bristled, not just with weapons, but with docking bays, manufacturing facilities, and what appeared to be entire city-sized habitation modules. This wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a mobile civilization. How? Krath asked during the final approach. How did you hide all this from our intelligence networks? Ross's image on the communication screen showed the first signs of weariness. After the battle. We didn't hide it, Admiral. We built it where you weren't looking. What do you mean? Your scouts always focused on planets, on traditional colonization patterns. You never thought to look in the deep void between stars, in the dark matter streams, in the places where a patient civilization could build in secret for centuries. The escort brought them into a docking bay that could have housed a small city. As Krath was transferred to human custody, he found himself face to face with representatives of species he thought had been extinct, survivors of the 17 worlds his empire had destroyed, now wearing human military insignia, and working alongside their former enemies' conquerors. The Altans, he whispered, recognizing the bird-like features of beings whose homeworld he had personally overseen the destruction of mere weeks ago. Not all of us died when you cracked our planet, said the Altan officer escorting him. Enough survived in evacuation ships to preserve our species. The humans found us, gave us sanctuary, and offered us something we thought was impossible. What? Hope for justice. The processing center where Krath was taken was unlike any prison he had imagined. It was more akin to a diplomatic facility, with representatives from dozens of species working to document Vex war crimes and coordinate the liberation of enslaved populations throughout the Empire. Admiral Ross met him in a conference room that overlooked the vast interior of the station. Through the transparent walls, Krath could see the impossible scope of human preparation. Shipyards producing vessels at an incredible rate, training facilities preparing joint human-alien forces, and command centers coordinating operations across multiple star systems. "Your message is simple," Ross explained as he handed Krath a data crystal. "The human-led coalition of free worlds is now moving to liberate every system under Vex control. Your empire has exactly one opportunity to surrender unconditionally and submit to war crimes tribunals. And if we refuse," Ross gestured toward the viewport, where more fortress stations were visible in the distance, "then we do to your homeworld what you did to 17 others. The difference is, we have the firepower to crack planets from the safety of the next star system over." Krath studied the data crystal in his hands. It contained not just the surrender terms, but detailed intelligence about human capabilities that made it clear resistance would be futile. Ship designs that violated known physics, weapons that manipulated fundamental forces, defensive systems that rendered traditional warfare obsolete. "Why show me all this?" he asked. "Why not simply destroy us? Because unlike your empire, we believe in justice over vengeance," Ross replied. "The beings you've enslaved deserve to see their oppressors brought to trial, not simply obliterated. The civilizations you've destroyed deserve to have their stories told and their suffering acknowledged." A new figure entered the conference room, a human woman wearing the insignia of what appeared to be a supreme commander. She was older than Ross, with gray hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries of preparation. "Admiral Krath," she said, "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Coalition Defense Forces. You have 72 hours to return to your homeworld and deliver our terms. After that, we begin liberation operations with or without your compliance." "And if my people choose to fight?" Chen's expression remained impassive. "Then they'll discover what 17 civilizations learned too late, that some prey, when cornered, reveals itself to have been the predator all along." As Krath was escorted back to his flagship for the journey home, he realized the galaxy would never be the same. The age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had spent 3 centuries in patient preparation, and now they were ready to remake the galaxy according to their vision of justice. The Vex Empire's reign of terror was ending, not with the whimper of surrender, but with the roar of long-delayed justice finally arriving. In the deep void, the human fleets were already moving toward their next targets, carrying with them the hopes of every oppressed species in the galaxy. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had finally revealed its true nature. The end.